Welcome to the Therapists Uncut Podcast, where off-the-clock therapists who happen to be friends share their uncensored thoughts about real life. Join us weekly in spreading positivity and making mental health relatable through casual conversation, inspirational stories, and real talk with friends who happen to be therapists. Please welcome your co-hosts, Nikki Young and Alyssa Najera.
Welcome back to Therapists Uncut, everybody. My name is Alyssa Najera, and I am here with the wonderful Nikki Young. And today we're going to be talking to you guys about perfectionism.
I thought we were here to chair dance.
I noticed Nikki's got the groove going today. Yeah. I think we need our intro music like as we start the recording because we like to dance.
Yes, I need Alyssa pump me up music because you always are very alert and awake. It doesn't matter what time we record. You are there and you are ready. So I need a dose of that.
I will take that because today I'm feeling just a little sleepy. So hopefully y'all hang in there with me. So we are talking about perfectionistic tendencies. Some people might call that type A behavior. Ooh, the word I hate though is when people are like, ooh, he's super anal. I'm like, can we not use that word? Yes. People use that word to describe perfectionistic tendencies. And then we even sometimes call it like that high functioning anxiety where you're really good at what you do and you get a lot of things done, but it's actually coming from a really anxious place. So we'll talk more about that today too.
And I kind of think of it along a spectrum, right? So we're here to talk about when those perfectionistic tendencies go wrong. They don't go wrong for me. I'm really good at it. So. Yeah.
We're all really good at it. We need to have our own audio with the drum roll. We really do hope we are going to be able to make you guys smile today. I know we've kind of hit on some heavy topics recently. So today is all about having fun, helping you guys feel inspired, helping you guys reflect on things that maybe you want to change in the future or keep doing because they're working really well for you.
All right. I'm curious because I do view that and doing a little research before this episode. I don't know that I want to check in with you. I have historically viewed that tendency, perfectionism, all of the terms you just listed on a spectrum. Would you identify with that? Or do you feel, because I was reading some things and not everybody would feel that way. And the tendency in and of itself needs to be addressed no matter how slight.
Well, you know what? When you say it like that, I could definitely visualize it on a spectrum, depending on what things trigger you and how high that perfectionism goes. But I think some of us kind of live in that perfectionist world all the time. And I'll speak from a little experience. I think I talk about my dad a lot on this show. I might need to go back to therapy. I love my dad. My dad is hands down phenomenal. Now that I'm an adult and I totally understand why he did the things that he did when we were younger. But my dad was also a Marine. And when you are raised by a Marine, there's a whole lot of pressure on you to take initiative and to not make
mistakes. You even said that in a Marine voice. Oh. Take initiative.
There was a point in my life where I could name all of the freaking things that was like initiative, integrity, because he would recite them over and over. And I'd be like, oh, Dad, I just want to do my homework. So I know that for me,
what a rebel. Just let me do my homework.
I know, right? I was such a rebel kid. So I grew up learning that, and he would, again, likely disagree, but I grew up learning like, hey, you get it right the first time. And when you don't get it right the first time, like shit's going to hit the fan and it's not going to be good.
So, I mean, that speaks to where perfectionism can come from, right? There's so many different, I think, factors that contribute to it. But if you're sitting here and you're identifying with either what Alyssa said, or you're that constant high achiever, and I mean, if we take it to, back in school, were you the one where an A- or a B+ was just the end of the world?
Oh, fuck right? Yeah. Right? Oh, a 4.0 was not acceptable. It needed to be like a 4.2 or 3 because I had several AP classes. Mm-hmm. It was terrible.
Mm-hmm. So I have historically viewed it as similar to stress. At high levels or at sustained moderate levels even, stress is toxic for our body, right? But there is a certain level that is beneficial because it pushes us to be motivated. It pushes us, we'll go to the academic. If we're stressed about a test, we're going to study for it, right? But once it passes that threshold, then we get the actual physical effects of chronic stress. We have the mental effects. So and maybe I have been viewing it wrong because when I think about the word in of itself, perfectionism doesn't sound very good. But when I think about that drive to succeed, yeah, see, I'm reframing things for myself because the drive to be perfect is not healthy. So I think I've been viewing it wrong in terms of on the spectrum. I think that drive to be as good as we can possibly be is healthy in the right dose. But when it crosses over into perfectionism, that's where we ain't doing so well.
So like many of the things that we talk about in healthy doses and small doses, it can be a great motivating factor until it's not. It's kind of like, I trust you until I don't, right? It's like this fine line of when you cross over and it starts being a negative part of your life. And when we talk about like the underlying pieces of perfectionism, if you're somebody who relates to this or feels like I always got to get it right, or when I show up, I'm showing up 110% every single time because I refuse to screw up in front of anybody, ask yourself, one, when do you feel like that started? And two, what are some of the underlying things for you? An entire episode on fear of failing. And fear of failure is huge when it comes to these very particular tendencies.
Very particular tendencies.
Very particular.
I love that. So I really need to change the way that I have internally thought of perfectionism. You know, I think stress is on that spectrum, but perfectionism is very different than striving to be your best. So I need to change how I view it, probably because I am a perfectionist. But
we're in deep therapy right now. Continue, Nikki.
Right? I feel like this episode is just to help us process, at least me.
Yeah.
So I think we do need to. I need to redefine that in my head. Right? Striving for your best and striving to do well in everything has its place. And then perfectionism, is that a defense mechanism that's not the accurate term I'm looking for, but is that a shield to protect us from failure, judgment, etc.?
I see it as that very thick wall that refuses to allow any room for failure, any room for being blamed, especially for being blamed for things that are not my responsibility, but I know that I'm going to take responsibility for it, and any room for any kind of guilt or even level of incompetency. So think of and for our listeners, think of when you started a new job, especially if you're already a pretty established professional, but you're kind of dropping into a different profession or industry maybe, and you walk in and you're like, holy shit, like I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. So I am going to go home and I'm going to study and I'm going to work 15 times as hard because I refuse to look like I am incompetent at doing this job that I know I can do. And it's like this added pressure. And it's not even just pressure. If we talk about like that physiological feeling of stress, it amplifies that, right? You can feel it in your stomach. Maybe you're not sleeping because you're ruminating over all of the things that you have to do and get right and fix. And we get stuck in our head a lot. And now that I'm talking about it out loud, like, damn, I think I really do need to go back to therapy and figure this out more. Because when you get on that like high of achieving, you can start equating your value and worth to all of your achievements. And then when you stop achieving, well, what does that mean about you?
Hell yeah. And did you really stop achieving, or did you just stop achieving with that metric that you were using?
Yeah, the metric.
And I've been hearing this with parents a lot too in therapy, just that striving to be perfect in terms of the balance between what you just described at work and home life, parenting, just think this expectation that they kill it in every single scenario and environment, and there's no room for failure. I have to do it. I might be sleeping 3 hours because my house is clean, my kids are 100% taken care of, all of my work is done, and even next week's project has started. But, I slept 2 hours. But at some point,
it doesn't matter how much you slept because you got all the shit done that you needed to do because you're so good at setting these very
executed it perfectly.
Perfect execution with the fact that I was also like killing myself in doing it. So these perfectionist tendencies are also the result of setting really high, unrealistic expectations, either on ourselves, maybe others put it on us, or maybe you're even that person and you have your family dynamic or your work dynamic, and you set that expectation on other people.
right? I think that oftentimes that's the case. If someone has perfectionistic expectations of themselves, then oftentimes, not often, those are going to be projected on others as well. So, I mean, back to the kid example, if you are I'm going to throw myself under the bus again. I have perfectionistic tendencies around certain things in particular. Like you were describing your dad, and I was like, wait, around my what?
I said like your hat?
My hats?
Yeah, like when you developed your hat. Do you remember that conversation we had on the last episode?
Yeah, so Alyssa is referring to this grid diagram that and so I had to think about it because Alyssa's like, oh my God, that was insane. And I'm like, wait, which time? Because I do this all the time. Like this grid diagram to help me figure out what hats to buy for catalyst counseling, right? But there was so many factors to take into. This is another episode. That is the OCD tendencies that we can address on another episode. But this is a question I've wanted to ask throughout is that, I'm going to wrap back around. Sorry. When we have our own perfectionistic tendencies, I'm throwing myself under the bus. We then project that onto the people around us. If you've got kids, like you had just described, like you were describing your dad, and I'm thinking, oh crap, I think I'm that person, right? I have to check myself to not expect perfection from the kids, right? In certain areas, that sounds terrible. I sound like a terrible parent right now. In certain areas where I am very thorough, I expect the same level of thoroughness, and I have to check myself that a child is not capable of the same level of thorough chore doing that an adult is. So, and this is something else I've been wanting to ask this the whole episode. Would you say that perfectionists are always aware of their perfectionistic tendencies?
I love that you and I. Yeah. I can't keep a straight face because you and I are professionals in the field and we're like, oh, fuck. This might be worse than we thought it was. I mean, call my therapist. Somebody schedule me an appointment because this shit is just off the wall right now. So again, it goes back to that self-awareness. We are here not because we have all the answers for you, but because we want you to reflect and practice self-awareness within yourself.
Self-reflection to me is one of the biggest tools that humans can pull from. Or to me, that to have and develop that ability to self-reflect is humongous. Now, don't get me wrong. If you discover some significant concerns, you have to have skills to work through that as well. But if we never know that there's something we maybe potentially should be working on, it's just going to snowball, right? And these tendencies are just going to grow throughout life. But self-reflection will highlight so much in and of ourselves. And we have to have the humility to see it, right? Humility to see that I have unrealistic expectations for my young child when it comes to chores at times, that my wife is fantastic at balancing me out and being like, it's like the throat clear and kind of does the head tilt and then the shake. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's unrealistic.
But you have to be ready to receive that feedback, right? Because if you're not ready, that defense wall is going to come up and then you're just going to argue. And then you wind up in my office because you're fighting over the kids and chores and totally. Absolutely. And we talk about that guilt that kind of comes up, or that pressure to be like 110 all the time. This speaks exactly to what Natalie Silla talked about in our episode where we talked about mom guilt, right? Because moms and parents and caregivers set this very high expectation on ourselves based on the things that we put in our head, the things that our parents put in our head, the things that our neighbors and social media and books and professionals put in our head. But really, you are the only person that can determine what you can do and what is too much and what's enough and what's key being realistic goals.
Heck, yes. So I want to talk about, because I think this is a key point. A lot of perfectionistic individuals are aware that is a tendency. Some don't think there's an issue with it. Some are aware that it can get out of hand for them and they need to monitor that. And some people are completely unaware that they have these tendencies. So what are some traits? What are some key things to be aware of that can help one identify whether or not they are, failing
if you look up workaholic or workaholism and you match that definition to a T because you are the person that is just over involved to the point where it is now negatively impacting your health or your relationships, you may be struggling with some perfectionist tendencies. I can't even say it. Perfectionistic.
I know. I'm getting tongue-tied, man.
Tendencies.
Are you the one that gets the review at work? And it's a fantastic review. You know, you got like a lot of 4s, and then there's a couple 3s where you just met expectations and you didn't blow the expectations out of the water, but it was a solid review. And you're pissed and your whole day is ruined because you did not get all 4s on that review.
Yes, I call bullshit because I am way above average. How can you tell me that I'm barely meeting expectation? Terrible. And for me, that's when my defense wall comes up. And it has nothing to do with my employer or, my poor husband. My poor husband, because he gets, and I talk to him about this all the time, and he has to like hold me and remind me it's going to be okay. Because I'm like, why are you telling me this? I struggle with criticism sometimes because I'm like, I did the best I could. And he's like, I just asked you to put the milk away. Like, it's not even a big deal. I'm like, I always put the milk away. And you just want to focus on this one time I didn't put the milk away. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that when it is a skill set to be able to receive feedback.
It is. Can you think of, okay, keep going.
No, and I think it's a skill set that perfectionists are going to struggle with, right? Because we have that expectation expectation of ourselves to be perfect. So when we're getting that feedback that we're not, it's going to really just strike a couple nerves.
Yeah, several nerves. And when we talk about negative cognitions, or the clinical term, negative core belief, it's going to remind me that I'm not good enough. It's going to remind me that I did something wrong or that I should have done something different. And it's going to trigger all of this stuff that if you have not dealt with yet, it's all coming out. And it's coming out like tenfold. And your partner or your peer or your supervisor is like, what was that? It's so strange the way it comes out.
Completely, right? And then it also looks like, are you neglecting your self-care because you're so busy striving for perfection in all of these areas, right? Are you not sleeping? Or have you not, if working out is important to you or something, well, it is something we should do for our health. Have you not engaged in any physical activity and you don't know how long because you are spending such late hours at work trying to make sure every loose end is tied up, right? Are you, right? Self-care in general, however you want to interpret that. Are you neglecting self-care because you're striving to just do everything perfectly?
Are you neglecting anything that is significantly important in your life to achieve these other areas that you feel like you need to be overachieving and have perfectionism in? And if that is the case, then you want to make sure that you reflect on it, because it's possible that you might just have this intense fear of failing, right? Or fear of imposter syndrome, right? Like that's a big like pop psychology word right now. I don't know if is it a real thing?
I mean, I have always heard it referenced, yes, as a real thing. Whether it's,
when I say real, is it diagnosable? Is it
it's not a diagnosable disorder in our clinician's Bible, but I think it very, very adequately describes. It perfectly describes a dynamic that's absolutely a thing.
Yeah,
I think speaking of private practice, I think a lot of private practice therapists experience that in relation. They could be killing it as a clinician or as a therapist through maybe an agency or an organization. I think that act of stepping out on your own for a lot of therapists who aren't maybe necessarily business minded or don't have that background. I've heard that from a lot of individuals, that they have this imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? Like, okay, I was a good therapist, but now I think I can run a business. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm faking it till I make it kind of deal.
And it's only a matter of time before everybody sees what's really underneath this, that I'm actually not capable. So that's where that fear comes from. We talk about private practice therapists. There needs to be a course. Like when we all go to therapy school, we need to have courses on all this stuff, because I wonder, do private practice physicians struggle with the same things that private practice therapists do? Anyways.
Oh, 100%. I've said that like 5 times today. Where is this random phrase coming from? 100%, 100%. Sorry, I don't know. We're going to get out the call and Anthony's going to be like, so you didn't say but you said 100% 35 times in one episode.
I love it. What about procrastination? Does it fall within this umbrella of something that might be helpful to be mindful of?
I think it
perfectionism?
can.
In what way?
I think there's a lot of things that contribute to procrastination. One of which is very likely perfectionism. Because if I am scared to not excel, or if I am scared to fail, if I put it off, there's a version of that where I'm not failing, or I'm not facing the possibility of failure. I think that could absolutely be a factor.
So you see, I'm asking you this because now I'm like, damn, I'm doing so much self-reflection in this episode that I'm like, is my procrastination a problem too? Well, ding, 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 it is.
Right. And I think that procrastination can come from so many different, I don't think it's always necessarily tied to perfectionism, but I absolutely think that there is a subset of procrastination that is.
Like within the family.
So we've spent most of the episode, I'm realizing, talking about performance perfectionism. I just coined a term. I don't know if it's a thing or not, but I love the alliteration. My Stacy will make fun of me, not make fun of me. That sounds mean. She does not ever make fun of me, but she will we have a dynamic where we can tease each other and we love it. So she gives me crap I just speak in alliteration sometimes because it's just so satisfying to me. So anyways, performance perfectionism. I'm realizing that we have focused primarily throughout this episode on that form of perfectionism. And maybe that's because that's what Alyssa and I struggle with. But I think if we take a step back, there's so many other types and forms and ways in which it can manifest, right? I mean, I'm thinking almost like we've talked about social media in private episodes. Ooh, join Therapists Uncut as they get uncensored in our private episodes.
VIP, that's just not going the right direction. We're going to come back from that squirrel real quick. Back to performance perfectionism.
We've talked in prior episodes about social media. So there's that form of perfectionism too, right? Where I have to present myself, my family, my life perfectly to the world, right? There's no room for reality. So everything is photoshopped or everything is filtered or whether that be a photo filter or whether that be an information filter, right? All of my posts are, look at my perfect family. Look what we did today. And there's that pressure, I think, to be perfect as well.
You say social media, and I think like any avenue where anyone can visibly see you electronically through technology, because I'm thinking of emails. How many of you reread your emails like 8 times before you send it out because you need to be 100% sure that that email you send out sends the right message, there's no grammatical errors, everything is clear, and you are certain that that is your best foot forward as you reply to your RSVP to the luncheon. Like,
yes, comma, I will be there, period. Whoa.
Oh, let's rewrite that one again. We gotta do that again.
No, absolutely. And it doesn't just have to be on social media, right? How you present it. Well, this might come back into play in a couple months as COVID starts to subside. The social functions, right? Presenting yourself with your best foot forward. Is it fashion and clothing and that kind of presentation and perfect presentation?
We're all about the P's today. You're just going to see P's all over our social media.
Alliteration brings me such pleasure. Like it is just a listen. I could sit there and listen to alliteration instead of like the finest composers and be so happy. It's like my version of classical music. It just,
Maybe one day I'll understand that, but right now I'm like,
okay. Look at that judgment all over Alyssa's face, man.
I never judge you. So we
doing a podcast with a fucking nut.
I love it. This is why our listeners listen, right? We love you, Nikki. So we went from performance perfectionism to, did you say perfect perfectionism? No, perfect presentation perfectionism. What did you just say that gave you so much joy?
Oh, perfect presentation.
So I love it. Performance perfectionism, perfect presentation, which that perfect presentation kind of comes from that like high personal standard that we put upon ourselves too. So there's a few different ways we can view perfectionism, or that's documented. So we've got the self-oriented, which is we put it upon ourselves, and now we have very high unreasonable expectations upon ourselves. The other-oriented, which is other people put those expectations on yourself, which will likely turn into you putting them on yourself as well. So I would put my dad under other-oriented. And then there's the socially prescribed, not presentation, perfectionism, which is you now have that expectation on the others around you, whether it's your kids, your spouse, your friends, your peers, your colleagues. But you have that same high level of other people too. And actually, Nikki, in one of our episodes, you talked about a friend or a recent conversation that you had about having some self-reflection on their organization expectations. Do you remember that conversation? I thought it was really cool. I think you had said,
you're going to have to give me more details.
It wasn't a super long conversation that we had, but I believe you said they asked their staff, are we putting too much pressure on you guys?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. No, I absolutely remember that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like that there's no room for failure, get it right.
Yeah.
With all these unrealistic expectations.
That was like an organizational example of self-reflection, like organizational reflection on their part, right? To make sure that they did not have unreasonable perfectionistic expectations. Totally.
And here's another way that I just thought of that these perfectionist tendencies can kind of bite you in the ass. If I have staff or if I am managing an organization, I love all the people that have these tendencies because they are just killing it. But at some point I am going to be worried that they're going to burn themselves out. But I have heard people say, like, I have so much to do that I don't have enough time for already. And now I'm getting more to do. And I'll often tell them, well, yeah, because you're fucking good at what you do. So they're just going to keep giving you more and more of it. And if you keep doing it, you're setting the expectation for them that you can do it all, when really it's not a realistic expectation. Mm-hmm. So be really mindful, you guys, of what is realistic and set realistic and attainable goals for yourself. I do have a quick question. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Do you know anyone who is like, quote, successful? Maybe they're an author, maybe they're a co-founder of something, who does not struggle with these perfectionist tendencies?
No.
So like the classic overachiever, but without the umbrella of perfectionism?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and see, that's where I reverted back to my definition internally of perfectionism being on a spectrum, because I absolutely think that in order to be successful and to achieve high standards, goals, etc., I think you have to have that level of motivation and desire to put out quality, to be the best that you could be. But I think that's where I have to check my definition and recognize that that's not perfectionism. So are there successful achieving individuals out there that are perfectionists? Maybe
that are not
in recovery.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And then are there individuals out there who are high achieving, high expectations of themselves, but it doesn't cross the line into perfectionism, and or they have addressed that? Yeah, I think probably both.
I want to hear from those people. If you are listening to this and you are a recovering perfectionist that is still able to do great things in life, whatever that means to you, please contact us because we would love to interview you and get your perspective.
Heck yeah.
All right, y'all. That
100%.
100. Today is just going to be called 100.
We just named the episode like 100%. It's done. You can take that off the list of things to do.
And Nikki, thank you for inspiring the titling of our episode. And now we have a nice little inside joke with all of our listeners if you guys are catching this episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know that your time is very valuable and we appreciate you choosing to spend it with us.
I second what Alyssa said. We just want to thank you for being with us and joining us on our mission of making mental health more relatable, a part of everyday conversation. Join us on the first and third Mondays of every month.
And if you have not yet, make sure you guys subscribe and check out our show notes at therapistuncut.com. You have any recommendation?
Drop us a comment. Let us know. I know you guys have topics you want to hear about or have us discuss or bring in guests on that topic. So give us that feedback and we'll do our best to. I'm trying to come up with a perfect alliteration to end this, and I can't come up with it. But we will, I don't know. We'll do it. We'll take it. Ooh, bye. See ya.
See you next time, y'all.
Thank you for joining Therapists Uncut, a production of AMP Smart Business. To learn more about Therapists Uncut and stay up on upcoming episodes, please subscribe and follow us on social media. As a reminder, although the Therapists Uncut co-hosts are licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to substitute professional mental health counseling. If you need professional therapy, please contact your local provider or primary care provider. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapists Uncut.